do. I'm going to introduce a friend of mine, Robert Spector. He's been with Rock of Israel Ministries since, he said, 40 years. Now, just look over there at him, and, you can tell that he probably started working for him when he was about 3. So his father actually started it many years ago, and 71 or something like that, he started that. And before that, his father was a missionary in Haiti and West Africa and just all sorts of stuff. He's got a lot of sea stories, a lot of war stories, and maybe he's like me. All of his are true. Some of mine are true. I think all of his are true. But we've enjoyed having Michael with us, with Robert with us this week, staying in our home and comparing notes of places where we've been. He lived in Haiti, grew up 5 years or something like that in Haiti, and for me, I spent 3 weeks in Haiti one night. Yeah, it was it was something else, and so. I've enjoyed having him. Now, Robert has a ministry. His ministry is evangelizing and getting the word of Yeshua to the Jewish people. And so the way he finances this stuff is that they travel all year long, and they sell Judaica, things that a lot of churches and places you don't have the opportunity. So I know it's a Shabbat, and some people have a problem with buying and selling on Shabbat, and I would ask you to look at it. It's not buying and selling. This is sowing into his ministry. Okay, that's what this is. And so, if you would look at all of the nice things that he's had. I mean, we've bought things from Robert over the years, and we still have them. We still use them. And so it's all good, high quality materials. And so, in fact, there's one of them out there before he leaves. I'm going to get. Don't sell your last one of the complete Jewish study Bible. Okay, that one's mine. All right, don't sell that one. Or if you do, I'll get another one. That's okay. But no, he's been a friend for quite a few years, and so. I would really ask you to look at his wares out there and be aware that is his way of financing their mission of getting the gospel out to our Jewish people. And so in that regard, it's not, this is not a commercial thing. I can guarantee, I know Robert, and he pinches pennies for every little thing, because we talked about trying to get all of his wares into that skateboard that he calls a car out there. And so it's always a real hoot to try to help him out with that. So, and also Robert taught me something yesterday. I was out, he was working, doing his some of the things that he needs, catching up with things. And so I went out in my garden and was working out there. And then Robert came out, and he's looking over my stuff, and I'm trying to prepare, after this freeze and everything, I'm finally ready to plop that stuff in the dirt. And he's out there looking at this and that and the other, and with a real interest. And I says, "Oh, you're a gardener?" And he says, No. My wife does all the gardening. She's the gardener." And I thought to myself, dang, why didn't I think of that? When I was shoveling all of that stuff yesterday, But it looks like he's got it right. So Robert taught me something on that. So I'd like to welcome Robert up here this morning, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his program. And then he is special because he's going to actually deliver the message this morning. Okay, good. You're set.
I'm set. Thank you. Shabbat shalom. It's a pleasure to be back. I was here, I think, about 3 years ago or something like that. And so I travel across the country, number of different places, churches, conferences, conventions, and always a pleasure to visit with Rabbi. Now, As he said, we've been enjoying telling stories, but his stories are pretty spectacular. I mean, Pat was telling me about his deal with his cut off hand and baby that came back to life, and just amazing stories. And so it's always nice to see and hear how God has moved in the hearts and lives of fellow ministers and fellow believers. But this morning I have so much I want to share. First, want to share about our ministry. Then I'll share or read the scriptures from the Haftorah, and then share a bit after that. The ministry of Rock of Israel, as was mentioned, was formed and created by my father, and so he wanted to share Yeshua with his people. And he was on the foreign mission field in Africa when God spoke to his heart to come back to America. And that was in about 1969. And that was a very special time in America, because that was the 70s were a watershed of Jewish people coming to faith in Yeshua. And so God called him from Africa to start a ministry to his people here in America. So he started Rock of Israel Ministries in the Los Angeles area. And then when I graduated from college, he asked me to help him in the ministry. And I did, and then became president of the ministry later, and moved it from California to Cincinnati. Many people ask me why. Why would I move from sunny Southern California to Cincinnati? And last week I was wondering the same thing. It was pretty cold, but it was a good move for us. I found out that 70% of the U.S. population is east of the Mississippi. East of the Mississippi. 70%. I think the other 30% must be in Los Angeles. But anyways, it was a good move, for we were now central to most of the population, and we began to go to different cities and hand out leaflets, tracts about Yeshua being the Messiah in many different cities like Washington, D.C., New York City, Atlanta, Philadelphia, all the major cities, Chicago, Florida. And so that worked for a while, but with the advent of the cell phone, everybody's texting or listening to music or talking on the phone, and so it's hard to get their attention on the street. And so God gave us a different way in which to engage Jewish people in conversations about the Messiah, and that is the marketplace. Evidenced by all the things I have on the table, we have a ministry of going to state and county fairs with Judaica, Jewish items, and the Jewish items draw Jewish people to us. We don't have to go looking for Jewish people. They come to us. And we have a wonderful time of telling them that we're Jews who believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. And so many of them think that you can't be Jewish and believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. And so we're there to plant seed. And I have a video I'd like to show you, a short video of how that happens. You might be thinking, well, how do you have a conversation with Jewish people? And so watch this video as to how we do that.
Rock of Israel Ministries has found a unique way to reach both Jewish and Gentile people with the gospel. In the marketplace, we've been renting booths at state and county fairs. However, one of the best fairs we have found is actually not in the U.S., but in Toronto, Canada. It is at the Canadian National Exposition, also called the CNE, and it has 1.5 million attendees each year. Toronto is a city much like New York, with a very diverse population. We meet more Jewish people here than any other fair. And with our many Jewish and biblical products out there on the table, including books, Art of the Covenant models, jewelry, and more, it brings many curious people over to us each day, much like fishing and bait. For instance, last year at this fair, we were able to share the Messiah with over 325 Jewish people who came to our booth. That number is not even including the hundreds more non-Jewish people we speak with as well. And even if they do not stop to talk, hundreds more will stop dead in their tracks and read our large banner, which says, Jesus made me kosher. Jewish people will stand there for a minute or more and read how Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. Of course, many non-Jewish people stop to read it as well. We cannot tell you how productive this unique banner has been over the years. For those who do come over and talk with us, most will take a bookmark, which is a copy of the banner, Jesus Made Me Kosher, and listen as we share how we are Jews who believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah promised to our people. Of course, there will be some who are open to the message. If they are open, we will give them a free book of Jewish testimonies or something similar. Conversely, there are always some who oppose us being there as well. Sometimes we get a visit from local rabbis who seek to stop what we are doing. They show up with video cameras and argue with us. Nevertheless, we are sure that the gospel will go forward no matter what the situation. And the booth in Toronto is just one of the many booths we have rented and continue to rent across North America each year, armed with good volunteer staff who love God and love the Jewish people. With all that being said, may we ask for your help in reaching people? Renting the booth in Toronto since 2006,
So this is how we're reaching out to Jewish people across America. We have a booth at in January, we have a booth at the South Florida Fair. Last year we were there. And then in February, we have a booth at the State Fair, which is in Tampa. In March, we set up a booth. By the way, we know when to go to Florida, especially when you're from Cincinnati. And in March, we set up at the Miami Fair, but the very day that it was to open, it closed due to COVID. And every fair after that closed. The San Diego Fair, the Washington State Fair, the Maryland State Fair, the Ohio State Fair, all of the fairs closed last year. And so we were just glad to be able to go to a mini fair in Florida in January, and the other fairs have been postponed to one is in April, one is in May, and we're hoping the others will all happen in their normal times. So pray that things will continue to open up and we'll be able to be at the fairs again. Now, last year because these fairs closed, we had to look for other venues and opportunities to proclaim Yeshua. And so we did that through Facebook ads and Google ads. Facebook, we put on a number of ads, promoted different things. And in fact, we have one of our staff has a cooking show on Facebook called Taste of Wine. Her name is Wine, last name is Wine. And so she has Taste of Wine and is a cooking show. And then I tried to do something. I'm terrible with the camera, but I tried to do something. So I had story time with Grandpa Spector. And so we did a few of those editions, just trying to engage people on the internet. And then one of the last ads we put up was an ad that showed a video of the worship teams in Israel, the Messianic worship teams in Israel, showing that there are young Messianic Jews in Israel worshiping Yeshua. And so it was something that we promoted across Facebook and Google, and even targeted Israel with some of our ads, even though most of our outreach is here in the United States. The second area of ministry for us, of course, is to go to churches and conferences and promote ministry to Jewish people, and also to understand that the Bible is a Jewish book written by Jews. And so we're going to churches and saying, Jewish people wrote this book, this Bible, obviously under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but we're helping Christians understand the Bible in the culture and context it was written. And so that takes a lot of our efforts. We also hope to instill in the hearts of Christians a love for Israel, a love for the Jewish people. The Bible tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and the Bible shows us how, the Messiah's love for his people. He cried over Jerusalem. And so we want to encourage Christians to share their faith with their Jewish friends. Let me see. The scripture that is the Haftorah for today, I want to read to you. It's amazing scripture that I think I just wonder what rabbis are thinking when they read that this week. This Haftorah portion is so messianic and so thrilling to me, and I hope it is to you. In Ezekiel Chapter 36, this is the Haftorah portion. Ezekiel 36, verse 24. For I will take you from the nations, gather you out of all the countries, and bring you back to your own land. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean from all your uncleanliness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart. I will put a new spirit within you. I will remove the stony heart from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my ruach within you. Then I will cause you to walk in my laws, so you will keep my rulings and do them. Then you will live in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you will be my people, and I will be your God. Well, that God has kept his promise. They are in the land. He has given us a new heart and a new spirit within us. He has changed our hearts. He's put his laws in our hearts. It's interesting as I travel, I find, a lot of churches telling me, or Christians telling me that, they're saved by grace. They don't have to follow the law. And I said, well, what do you do when you come to a red light? Do you stop at the red light, or do you keep on going? And they said, well, they stop. And I said, well, that's a law. You keep man's law, but not God's law? And so I'm encouraged to see that God said he would put his laws in our hearts. And I want to tell you a story this morning. I've learned that there are colleges that are having storytelling. In fact, one of my friends that's in Jewish ministry is involved in teaching this aspect of storytelling. Storytelling has, through the ages, been a way to communicate history and to bring continuity to generations. And so even in colleges today, they are having classes on storytelling. So I want to share a story with you this morning. And I hope that through sharing this story, you will be encouraged, and not only encouraged, but perhaps motivated. And so this story is about a Jewish family, of course, and it's actually at the turn of the last century. A family came from, I think it was Lithuania, and settled in Boston. And then a man came from the Ukraine and came through Philadelphia, and his name was Louis. And the family in Boston had a daughter born there in Boston, and her name was Anna. Both families ended up in Los Angeles. And somehow these two, Anna and Louis, met. And they fell in love and got married and started a family. They had a couple of girls, but they wanted a boy. And so they desired that, and God fulfilled their desires, and they had a baby boy. Now, the problems began because 2 months after the baby boy was born, the father died in the flu epidemic of 1918. Now, we understand the problems of a flu epidemic, don't we? And, of course, this was devastating to this small family. But Anna did not remarry. She worked hard to take care of her three small children. She took on several different jobs. Of course, this was in a time, even in America, that jobs were scarce and money was scarce. But she raised these three children in Orthodox tradition. And her grandfather was a junk dealer in Ventura County and in Southern California. And I'm not sure why there was not more involvement in this woman, Anna. She was pretty much on her own. And so she worked hard. She not only had a job, but she took in laundry and ironing and just to make ends meet for her small family. And it was difficult, of course. And so along came a couple of ladies that saw her plight, saw how hard she worked, and they wanted to help her. They knew that she needed some help. And so they decided that they would help her by taking her to the store when needed, and they would help her with her laundry, and these two ladies would come and help her. But these two ladies asked her to come to church with them. They were Christians, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't go to church. We go to a synagogue. I'm Jewish." And they said, "Oh, okay." And but they continued to help her. That didn't stop them from helping her, that she wouldn't go to church with them. They continued to help her, but they would continue to ask her to go to church with them. And so then after some time of their help, she felt obligated. She thought, well, I need to do something. I can't do anything to help them. Maybe I'll go to church with them one time. And so when they asked again, of course, she said, all right, I'll go one time with you. I so appreciate all your help. And so she went to the church with them, and she was afraid, of course, in going to the church. She had never been into a church, and she kind of thought that they were paganistic. They believed in three gods, and so she wouldn't even look at the speaker, at the preacher. She had heard that preachers hypnotize people, and I don't know about rabbis, but anyway, she thought she wouldn't look at him, and so she just looked at the pulpit. And during the message, she saw a vision, and in this vision, she saw three Hebrew words, and they were all the same. Now, she didn't read Hebrew; she just knew that it was Hebrew. And so she wrote them down and thought that she would find out what they meant later on. So when she visited her father, she asked him what this meant. And he said, "Where did you see this?" And of course, she wasn't going to tell him where she saw that. And she said, "Well, I saw it on a building." And he was surprised. He said, "Well, it says Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh." And she was amazed. What was this doing in a church of all places? Hebrew writing and holy, holy, holy? What is this all about? And so it began to work in her heart and mind, to the point that Anna, the next time these ladies asked her to go to church with them, she said, okay. And they were surprised, but they were glad to get her to go. And so she went, and this time she listened to the message, and she heard the message about the Messiah. And because of that vision, she believed that it was the truth. And so she became a believer in Yeshua as her Messiah. Now, her children had a fit. They were now young adults after all this time. She had taught them not to even mention the word Jesus. Even in a curse word, they were not to mention it. She threatened that she would wash their mouths out with soap if they even said the word Jesus. And so they were aghast that she now believed in Jesus. But they saw that she was happier now, and they were concerned. Now, the middle sister had gone to Hollywood. This is Southern California. Had gone to Hollywood to study to become an actress. And so she was away at this time. And the two others contacted her and said, "You've got to come home. Mother has gone crazy. We need to do something." And so they were trying to figure out what to do. They thought about maybe, looking into sending her to an asylum, and then the one in Hollywood, was having trouble anyways. She was so just all the things. She almost had a nervous breakdown because of the rigors and all that was involved in becoming an actress. And so she thought she'd go home and rest and take care of this situation at home. And so she went home, and she was going to try to deal with this, and her brother said, "You've got to do something." I mean, she taught us not to even say Jesus. He said, "I remember when I was young that when the kids would make fun of me and were prejudiced against Jews, that she would comfort us and tell us that Jesus was an imposter, that he was the false Messiah, and here she's believing in him." And that she told us that the Christians were jealous of the Jews, that they created a God because they thought that the Jews were God's special people, and so they created a son of God. And so this is what she had taught us, and now she believes that he's the Messiah. And so the actress said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll go to church with her. I can spot a fake. I'm an actress. I know how people act. And so I'll show her where they're, just acting." And so she goes to church with her mother, and she can't understand, why are these people so happy? They're in church. Why are they happy? A religious service. Why are they so happy? What's got to do with this singing and being in church? And so she was amazed at that, and she watched the people, and she paid attention to what was said, and she could not find anything wrong with them. They just seemed to be having a good time at church. And so she decided to go back, and she went back 6 times. And finally she told her siblings, I'm sorry, I can't find anything that we can use against the church. I think we're going to have to let her be. She's worked so hard all her life. She's happy. Let her be. And maybe she'll come to her senses. And she said, "But I'll go one more time. I'll go, the 7th time and see if there's anything I can do. But I think we're going to have to let it be." So she goes the 7th time to the church, and they, nothing different, everything the same. And finally, at the end of the service, the pastor asked a man to pray as a benediction, and so the man gets up and starts to pray, and she watches him, and she related that she saw him, just a kind of a glory around him as he prayed. And so whether it was a vision or what, but he looked like he was glowing. And he prayed so a beautiful prayer that she believed that he was sincere. Not only was he sincere, but that what he was saying was speaking directly to God, and she became a believer in Yeshua also. So now we have 2 against 2, and very soon after, the other sister believed too, and now we have the one boy, the boy that had been the special child of the family and the youngest, and he was by himself. He thought he was losing control of his household. He was the man of the house, and everybody was going the wrong way. And he would have arguments with them, and he would bring up all the things that Christians had done to the Jews, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the pogroms of Russia, the Holocaust was just happening, and he saw them. He wanted to show that the Christians were false and that they didn't know God like he knew God, but to no avail. In fact, his sister said, I was reading in the Bible today that I'm not to cast pearls before swine. He said, what do you mean calling me a pig? That's the worst thing you could call me. And he almost hit her. He was so upset he had to leave. And the next day, the mother, Anna, said to him, I would like you to come home early. He was known to stay out late at night. And she said, I'd like you to come home early. We're going to have a birthday party for your sister. And he says, well, who's coming? He was thinking about those 2 ladies, and he didn't know if he wanted to be in the house. And she said she named those 2, and he said, I don't know. Who else is coming? And she said, the pastor's coming. He said, what? A preacher in our house? No way. And he said, I'm not coming home. And so he went off to the dance with his girlfriend, and he began to get sick. And he just, felt bad. And finally, he had to tell his girlfriend, I need to take you home. I am just not well. I've got to go home. And so he took her home and went to his house, and he thought, it's almost midnight. Surely, the party's done, and he was safe. And he gets there, and it's not done. They're still there. And he thinks, well, I'm going in the house, and I'm going to tell that preacher to get out of our house. I'm the man of the house, and he has to listen to me. And so he went into the house, and the preacher began to talk to him about sports, and he was okay with that. In fact, he enjoyed talking about sports, and so he was talking, but all of a sudden the pastor threw a curveball at him. He said, have you ever asked God whether or not Yeshua is the Messiah? And he said, no, I don't have to. I know that God didn't have a son. That's ridiculous. God is not man. And he said, well, have you asked God? He said, I don't have to. And the preacher said, are you afraid to ask God? And he said, no, I'm not afraid. He had many battles in school when the kids would call him names, Kai Kishini, a dirty Jew. He had a lot of fights, so he wasn't afraid of anything. And he said, no, I'm not afraid. And the preacher said, well, just ask God. And he said, well, we Jews pray standing up. And he said, well, you could stand up or sit down. I think God will hear you either way. And he's thinking of excuses. He said, well, Jews have written prayers. And we have prayers that we memorize. And the preacher said, well, I want you to just pray from your heart. Just ask God from your heart. And so he realizes that he hasn't been in synagogue for probably since his bar mitzvah, and he's trying to remember any of the prayers. And so he starts out, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said, God, I know you didn't have a son. I know that Jesus is not God. But if you had a son, show me. Tell me. Give me a sign. You know, the Bible says that Jews require a sign and Greeks seek after knowledge. And so he asked, and immediately he begins to feel strange. Now he's not sick any longer, but he's got turmoil all through him. His stomach is roiling, and he doesn't know what is happening. He knows something is happening. And, of course, all the others start praying. And, I think they were Pentecostal, and they made a lot of noise. He gets up and closes the windows, and he doesn't want people in the neighborhood to hear this. And so he gets his eyes and mind off of his question, but he knows he's asked God for a sign. And the next day, he's laying on a couch, and all of a sudden, the couch begins to shake. And he gets a little worried because though it's Southern California and they have earthquakes, nothing else is moving, just the couch. So he knows it's not an earthquake. And yet the couch is shaking. And he's shaking, obviously. And it shakes him up. And he doesn't know what's happening. And then he starts to cry. And his emotions are all over the place. And he tells his mother, Mother, let's go talk to those women and find out what's happening to me. And so they go to these ladies, and she said, come on. And he said, no, I'll stay in the car. You go talk to them and find out what's happening to me. Well, she goes in, and of course they begin to pray. And he starts, with cigarettes, and nothing is making him calm down. In fact, it begins to taste terrible, and throws those cigarettes out, and he still is crying, and he's never cried before. And so she comes out, and his mother comes out, and he asks, well, what's happening to me? And she said, well, God is speaking to you. He said, I know, but what is it? What does this mean? What is happening? And she said, well, God's answering your prayer. And so now he is almost convinced that God is telling him that he had a son, and his name is Yeshua. And so he calls his sister, and he says, Ruth, would you go with me to service, and so I can find out for sure that this is, what's happening to me? She said, yeah, gladly. And he said, well, right now. And she said, well, the church isn't open until 7 o'clock tonight. He said, why don't churches keep their doors open so people can find out? And she said, well, it'll be open later. And so they go in, and she is just thrilled to have him coming in, and that he is seeking. And so she puts her arm through his and walking down the aisle, and all of a sudden he pokes his sister and he says, Ruth, are your shoes touching the carpet? And she says, of course they are. And he said, mine aren't. I'm as light as a feather. And you know what was happening. He was becoming a new creation, just like we read. His heart was being made flesh. He was given a new spirit within him. His sins were taken away. He believed that Jesus, Yeshua, was his atonement, and he became a new creation. In fact, he said that when he went outside, everything looked different. It looked so clear. It looked so beautiful. It was a new creation. He was a new creation. And so he became a believer in his Messiah. He went to Bible school. He became a missionary. He was a missionary in Haiti. He was a missionary in Africa. He was my father. Hyman Israel Spector spoke to many thousands of people about his Messiah. He took it literally when the scripture says, "You shall be a light to the nations." And so he went to Haiti, he went to Africa as a missionary to tell people about his Messiah, his God, and build churches, many churches in Haiti, and shared with villages in Africa. And then he came back to America to start a ministry to his own people. For when he became a believer, he was ostracized, but he wanted to tell them about his Messiah. He was zealous for Yeshua. And so he started the ministry Rock of Israel. And the ministry is celebrating 50 years this year as I continue the ministry that he started to reach Jewish people across America that Yeshua is our Messiah. Amen.